Okay, all right. So now we'll go now to the second part of our video on catalase neg gram-positive cocci na mga biochemical testing, no? And we'll now start with your alpha hemolysis, right? So gikan tag beta, karon alpha na pod, or your partial incomplete hemolysis. Now, when we discover a BAP, okay, let's say nya undergram staining kay cocci and chain, so strep, okay. And then, pag inoculate nato on BAP and ang growth niya kay partial or alpha hemolysis, then the first organism na pwede natong, or the first organism good na usually atong pwedeng assume or the possible identity of the organism na atong pwedeng ma-think una good is strep pneumoniae. That's why we now do these tests, which are usually very kanang indicative na good or kanang specific na jud for strep pneumoniae. And that's your Optokine susceptibility test and bile solubility. Now, please do not be confused with bile esculin and bile solubility. Lahi na siya. Ang bile esculin, you detect the ability to hydrolyze esculin to esculetine. Ang bile solubility, we'll discuss that later. Okay? Please do not mix the two. Alright? Okay. So again, for Optokine susceptibility and bile solubility, if it's Optokine sensitive and bile soluble, then that is S. pneumoniae, Streptococcus pneumoniae. But if it is resistant to Optokine and bile insoluble, we subject that to the bile esculin hydrolysis test. Okay, because it could be again your Enterococcus ba or your group D strep. Okay, so please take note. All right, so again that's for alpha hemolysis. Basta gani Optokine sensitive, bile soluble, naku, wag na mag-isip, press the buzzer. That's your strep pneumoniae. Now for strep pneumoniae, guys, again, there are other tests as I mentioned. Para sa good sa staph species, strep species. There are other tests that you can perform. A good example, Anna, is your Neufeld, okay, Quellang, okay? Neufeld-Quellang test, okay? Recall that strep pneumoniae is encapsulated, na siya capsule. Now, the Neufeld-Quellang test, what it does is ihang ginaswell, okay? Ginapaswell ang capsule, alright? Of the strep pneumoniae para mas makita ang capsule. Okay, so that's another test na pwedeng gamitin for strep pneumoniae to compare it to the other alpha hemolytic na organisms. Because the other organisms, I believe, they do not have capsules. Alright, so strep pneumoniae, you can do again Optokine, bile solubility, Neufeld-Quellang, dagan pang other tests. Okay, I will not elaborate na. We'll just focus on these two. As I mentioned again, we want to identify the organisms as efficiently and cost-effective as possible, right? Okay, and as quickly as possible then, all right? Okay, so again, Optokine susceptibility and your bile solubility test. Okay, all right. So again, your Optokine susceptibility test, still the same. It's an antimicrobial susceptibility testing. You detect, again, the ability or the susceptibility or resistance of the organism to this particular antibiotic, and that is Optokine. Some people say Optochin. I don't like. It's Optokine. Okay, I pronounce it as Optokine. Okay, so still the same procedure. BAP this time, still parehas siya sa bacitracin, right? BAP, again, we place the disc on, again, aseptically. That's your Taxo-P. Ayan, Taxo-P. Ayan, so again, still the same. Di na ka maglibog. Taxo-P, para kakinsa na siya? S. pneumoniae. Alright, letter P. Alright? Muna siya, Taxo-P, Optokine, letter P. Taxo-P, because again, para kakinsa siya, para kay S. pneumoniae, letter P. O, di ba? Then, of course, your Taxo-A, kinsa ganito antibiotic sa Taxo-A, bacitracin. Daghang letter A, di ba? Bacitracin. So, daghang A, that's for kakinsa ng organism. Huwag na mag-isip, group A, strep payo. Yan lang, okay? Alright. And again, Taxo-P, please take note, the other name of Optokine is ethyl hydrocuprine hydrochloride. Please take note. Optokine is also known as your ethyl hydrocuprine hydrochloride. And still the same after we observe for the zone of inhibition. Ayan, still the same. Susceptible if it's greater than 14 millimeters ang diameter. Okay, and negative or resistant if there's no zone of inhibition. So iyang no zone of inhibition or 6 millimeters ang iyang diameter. We measure lang the diameter again of the disc. Okay, all right. So kinsa ganitong sensitive ani, it's strep pneumoniae. And ang resistant, other alpha hemolytic na streptococci. Okay, all right. And if the zone is less than 4 millimeters, 14 millimeters rather, we confirm it with bile solubility. Okay, all right. Ayan. Also, an example di iPod of an organism na medyo pwede ka ma-confuse, ani, is you have strep pseudo, okay? Pseudo pneumonia. Alright. So pseudo meaning fake, not true. Nagpaka-as if lang siya na pneumonia siya, but it's S pseudo-pneumonia. Now, what it does, manggod, is if you don't incubate it at CO2, what happens is this will serve as, ano po Japon siya, this will serve, or it will become sensitive, okay? Because again, for Optokine lagi guys, usually ang sensitive is S pneumonia, okay? Now, if you really want to make sure na S pneumonia na siya, you have to incubate this with CO2 because under CO2, ma-inhibit ang, or dili siya makakross o inhibition ang pseudo-pneumonia. And of course, we confirm with biosolubility. Always, we confirm that with biosolubility. Because again, if biosoluble ang organism, it's usually S pneumonia yun. Okay? So, kanya siya S pseudo-pneumonia, pang pa-confuse lang daw na siya, or like, usahay magpakabibo, magpaka-as if na siya dyan ang gipili, bisag dili siya. Sure, okay, alright, ayan. So again, that's S pseudo-pneumonia and S pneumonia. Alright, so again, if you're questionable sa Optokine susceptibility test, we now proceed to their biosolubility test. You confirm it using biosolubility test. Okay, so ano naman ang biosolubility test? Okay, so ang purpose niya is you determine the solubility of the organism or of the colonies to 2% sodium deoxycholate or desoxycholate or bile. Okay, alright, so procedure. We suspend the organism in sterile saline, and then we add the bile or 2% sodium desoxycholate, incubate, and we observe for clearing. Okay, what it does, manggod, is your bile salts, okay, it promotes, okay, or it enhances the activity of the amidase or autolytic enzyme present in the organism. That's why mahimo siyang malays ang organism, mawala ilahang growth or malays yung colonies, therefore na ay clearing sa imuhang solution. Okay? Alright. So, here's an example. So, ang left, of course, that's negative, bile insoluble. Kaya nitubo naman siya. Okay? Turbid ra gyapon, meaning wala ni work ang bile, alright? Or wala siya enzyme aning amidase, okay? Na makapa-autolyze, meaning mulay siyang self. Therefore, mawala ang turbidity, mawala ang growth. And you're right, mo na positive. It's clear, meaning it's bile soluble and positive. So, unsay expected result ni S pneumonia, it's your right. Letter, the bile insoluble. Na other method is pwedeng diretso daw sa plate, okay? Like colonies, drapan daw nimo og bile, okay? And if mawala ang colonies, like mo disappear gid siya, then therefore it's bile soluble, okay? Alright. So pwedeng tube method, pwede put sa directly on the plate daw. On the colonies mismo sa BAP or sa plate, okay? Alright. Ayan. So that's for the alpha hemolysis. Now please take note again, if bile insoluble siya and resistant to Optokine, we subject to bile esquilin hydrolysis. If it's again bile esquilin positive, if it's negative, it's your viridans, okay? And if it's positive, di ba, pares ganina sa beta, subject to PYR hydrolysis and 6.5% NaCl. If it's PYR positive, 6.5% positive, then it's your Enterococcus. And if it's PYR 6.5% negative, you have your group D strep. Okay, all right. And the last type of hemolysis, we have your gamma hemolysis. Ayan, for no hemolysis, dali ra gyud na siya. So kinsa itong mga pwedeng organisms, again, still the same Enterococcus and your Streptococcus group D. So still the same bile esquilin ta. If bile esquilin positive, negative, non-hemolytic na mga strep, okay, pwedeng mga viridans. Bile esquilin positive, still the same, PYR hydrolysis and 6.5% NaCl. Still the same result, PYR positive, 6.5% positive, you have Enterococcus. And PYR neg, 6.5% NaCl neg, you have your Streptococcus group D. Ayan. So, in a nutshell, dali ra gyud ang gamma hemolysis, no? Okay. Kay gamay man usually ang mga strep usually, or marag kato ng like, you know, mga Enterococcus, strep group D. Ang Enterococcus species, if you really want to, ano pa gyud them, like, konyo, if you really want to like separate pa talaga them, char, they have their own types of tests pa dyan na wala na elaborate diri. Because we're focusing more on the strep species. Alright, so yeah, if you want to read more on that, it's in your Mahon and Bailey and Scottsport. Alright, ayan. And a summary, again, a flow chart. Basically, muna to siyang gidiscuss ganina. Medyo basin nalibog pa mo ani. Alright, so muna ni siyang gibasihan. This is from Mahon still. Alright, but basically muna itong na-discuss ganina. And a summary of all the results na to for the test and species. Again, base tracing susceptible, kinsa to siya, taxo A, you have of course the group A strep or strep pio. Next, you have PYR positive. Kinsa ba itong mga PYR positive? Of course, you have group A strep and Enterococcus, group D. Next, you have hyperate. Oh, hyperate, cam positive. Kinsa kanina, you have, of course, group B strep or your strep agalactiae. Again, kinsa tong hyperate hydrolysis positive pero gram-neg bacilli, you have Campylobacter jejuni or jejuni. And kinsa tong cam positive pero gram-positive bacilli, you have Listeria monocytogenes. Okay. Next, you have bile esculin positive. Isa itong mga bile esculin positive. Of course, you have your group D na strep ba or Enterococcus. Bile esculin hydrolysis positive. 6.5% NaCl positive. Huwag na mag-isip. Usara na siya. You have your Enterococcus group D na mga species. Optokine sensitive o biosoluble. Nako, kanina, duha pa lang na characteristics, makabalo na ka. This is your strep pneumoniae. Okay, wala ni siya Lancefield antigen guys ha, munang wala na siya group A, group B. So no Lancefield antigen, strep pneumoniae, optokine sensitive, bile soluble. Again, taxo P, muna siyang optokine is taxo P because it's for S pneumoniae. P, it's for SP pneumoniae. Okay. And last one, kinsa to mga lab positive, you have strep, Enterococcus and Biochemical. Alright, so basically guys, that's it for gram-positive cocci na biochem. Again, quite a lot no, to take in, a lot of reagents, a lot of principles, mga tests to really understand. But it's just the beginning. But wait, there's more pag yun. Samo tayo maabot sa mga gram-negative bacilli, mga enterobacteriaceae, inyong mga kagaw na nasa inyong tinai. Dagan kayong mga test, guys. So please prepare lang yun. Inform na po tamo daan na it's daghan jud siya. So, but we'll try to do it slowly, okay, para di mo dugo, di ba? Alright. And again, this is biochemical testing. We determine phenotypic, okay, phenotypic characteristics. When you say phenotypic, physical characteristics like, again, their ability to ferment sugars, the enzymes that they produce, right, and all those tests. And usually, in routine clinical laboratory, we opt or we use this biochemical testing. But again, biochemical testing has its own limitations. That is why, karon since changing times, magka-modern na ang times, there are a lot of assays and mga tests na mogamit na gyud og molecular methods, mga PCR, MALDI-TOF, ayan, MALDI-TOF, okay, ayan, MALDI-TOF, mga other tests pag yun now, which is more accurate and definitive pag yun sa pag-identify sa species. Like katulad yung mga species, subspecies pag yun, alright, because of these advanced na mga test methods, mostly mga molecular, okay? Mag-focus na yun sa mga genomics or sa mga genomes sa bacteria. Okay, but again, in routine clinical labs sa hospital, usually we still perform biochemical testing because usually if mo-opta na kutobrag species na wala pa yung mga subspecies, the biochemical tests can provide that. But again, as I mentioned, na siya yung mga limitations. That is why this is where the mga advanced tests na mga molecular methods come in. Okay? Alright, but for now, again, that's for gram-positive cocci na biochemical testing. I do hope that's quite clear. Again, please take note, do not be confused lang, do not overthink. Okay? I know it's quite overwhelming at first glance, but again, try to take it slowly, internalize it slowly, take it in slowly, alright? Slowly lang yun, basta first time, slowly lang yun. Charot, okay. Alright, so that's it for today's pre-recorded lecture, guys. I'll see you in our next lecture. Okay, alright. Have a great day and keep safe.